we were down working with NASA. And this is a question we found out that they had been asking for 12 years. In our storage environment, how much is getting used? I said, no, here, let me show you. 3 hours later, 4 hours later, he had the answer. They've been asking for this for 12 years. You figured it out in 4 hours.
And how does that play into the vulnerability of data? You had people like John McAfee saying that nobody is safe.
So there is no single silver bullet.
If you're doing millions of files, I've seen the financials of a few of these businesses, that adds up fast.
That adds up a lot. And what's the cost of being down?
How did this journey begin?
Actually, I started out in biomedical and electrical engineering. When that started really evolving, I got bored. So I moved to California and did a startup company with my stepfather. Unfortunately, CEO made some bad decisions, went bankrupt, and so that's when I had my entrepreneurial season.
That's my favorite part. Yeah. How did the transition from StrongLink to CrystalOnyx happen?
But I had this idea of not only let's take this, but let's take it to the next step.
Okay.
And the next step was
Hey everyone, my name is David Grinberg. I'm the founder of Green Mountain Advisors, and today I have a special treat for you. I'm sitting with Tony Cahill, the founder of CrystalOnyx. This is a data management business, honestly, something that is changing the market completely from what I've seen. I've been in the technology sector for a little bit now, reviewed a lot of companies, seen a lot of deal flow, and overall, I don't think that there's anything like what you're doing, and having you on the show, having you working with us as a client, and also somebody who ultimately is leading the charge in what I think is overall data migration, but also data management, is just super awesome to be part of. Thank you for coming down here to Miami, getting on this interview, on this show, and telling the world really what's going on in the data space, what's going on in AI, how can we improve our security, and how can we make the world a better place with data management, especially with the amount of technology coming out with OpenAI and the amount of data that it requires. This is a serious issue.
the floodgates are opening, right?
The floodgates are definitely opening. The energy costs are going up, and everyone's scratching their heads with what's next. So thanks again for coming.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the invitation to be here, and thank you for getting me to come out of the cold and down to the warmth of Miami. So
Yeah.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, Indiana is a little bit chilly, but
chilly. It's warming up. It's still chilly.
Not too much. Not too much. How many more months do we have left in there before?
According to Pexitani Phil, it's about another 3 weeks.
3 more weeks?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. At the time of recording this, by the way, it's February, end of February, so we're just turning the corner on the winter.
Middle of March, when March Madness starts, that's the over/under.
Right. So tell us, what is CrystalOnyx? How did this start? What made you decide that you needed to spearhead this? I mean, obviously, you've got more gray hairs than me, so you definitely know the game a lot longer than I do, and you've seen the whole evolution of technology as we know it in terms of data. So,
well, I don't know about the whole gamut of technology, but definitely parts of it. And
the important parts.
I'm only a couple of years older than you, really.
Yeah, I feel like that at least.
No, thank you. So CrystalOnyx, it's really it's the result of development over time. Nothing just happens, right? It's always a development. And really what we've come up with is something that's really unique. It's a intelligent digital asset management, storage management utility for the modern enterprise. If we look at what's gone on over the last number of years, we have this plethora of technology that's being used. It started out with ERP systems, manufacturing, websites, and the deluge of data, both structured and unstructured, just keeps growing.
Right.
To the point now that we have all these heterogeneous storage environments that don't talk to each other. So if you're an enterprise organization that's grown either through acquisition or organically over time, you have just a mix of all different types of systems, storage environments, applications that may or may not be able to communicate with each other. So how do you, if you're running a just-in-time or real-time business, how do you go through the gyrations in order to make that happen? And it's a struggle. It's a really big challenge. So that's one of the things we started really trying to address initially, is how do we just come up and start breaking those silos down? And that's really the genesis of where this started. And it started actually 10 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And we were doing something that really hadn't been done before, which is creating virtualization, but then being able to lay that across all different types of storage, connect to everything, without changing the native the native storage or server product itself. So the reason you bought Hitachi, or you bought Dell, or EMC, or pick your vendor, there was a reason for it. There was advantage that product had. And so we believed that our core philosophy in designing this is that the owners of the data should never be beholden to anybody for access or control of their data, and that includes us. So we have a completely open systems approach that states you can put CrystalOnyx in and manage it and be better, and if we're doing our job, it's a tool that you want to keep because you're getting a lot of value from it. And if it's not, then we shouldn't be there in the first place. You can pull it out and still get access to all your data. And
Yeah,
we've proven that.
that's really a big deal, because a lot of these security providers will put themselves into your system, and then once it's time to say, okay, we don't like how you're handling customer service or your pricing, or there's just a better offer on the market, it becomes impossible to
It's very
switch off
sticky,
of them.
right? It's hard to get out of it. It's
It's
hard to
super.
migrate out of it. And so that was something we saw. If if we're going to do this, let's do it right.
Right.
And so that's where I really took this and rebranded it as a utility, because everything before was like, well, it's a platform. It's a platform. It's not. Because what we're doing is connecting to what an enterprise or organization already has, and we're making it better. So making it better includes being able to provide visibility, data clarity, right? So I can get clear view, quick access to something, orchestrate file movements so that the right files, the right data that I need to do whatever my job or role is, show up in the right time at the right place in the way I need to use it, right?
So for the average person who isn't familiar with the level of data complexity you're talking about here, this isn't just your average Google Drive, move the dock into this thing.
You're
This
talking
is-
about like millions of Google Drives, right?
Millions of
of
Google-
drives of laptops.
and just full.
Yeah, just full of data. Where is it? How do I get access to it? How many copies do I have, right?
Right.
What's sensitive and critical versus what's taking up space, and why are we keeping it on these really expensive locations when it should be moved off? And how do you do that? And so one of the ways in what we saw, classically it's always been this model called HSM, hierarchical storage management.
Okay.
Which is I have my primary and I have my secondary, or my primary, secondary, tertiary storage. And I'm going to, if I don't want to use it or keep it on my primary storage, I move it off, but I leave a stub behind. It's classic in this way that it's been done for a long time. But if you start going into the environment that we have now, where everything's distributed, it's peer-to-peer, we've got cloud, we've got software-defined storage, it becomes very, very difficult. And if you start laying that breadcrumb of stubbing and following it back, you end up with even a more complex environment than you started with. So the way we approached this was, well, at the heart of it, CrystalOnyx is a metadata management engine, which means that we're looking at the file, we're looking at the storage, and we're tracking where that data file lives all the way through its life cycle. If it's on a primary, a secondary, a cloud, a tape library.
So what would the life cycle of a file even be for the first
Well, that's
time?
cool.
anyone hearing
It
it?
really depends on the organization. There
Right.
is no set way. Everyone's different. So you have to be able to say, what is my business rule for not only just my business, but for my department, for my group, for my independent users. And what I like about what we've done is we can use searching, queries that you use for search. Everyone's familiar with that. We've made it very simple. But also you're able to use those same intelligent queries looking at any piece of metadata that's been collected, and then apply it for orchestration. So I can say any file that has not been touched for 6 months, 9 months, that is part of this department owned by this group, maybe it has these identifiers on it, we're going to now archive that. Or conversely, this is very sensitive. This is important information that we always have to have available, no matter what. Great, let's make sure that's always on high performance, fast storage. And so you can get very, very granular on how you apply this across the entire data set and infrastructure.
And for the tape libraries and other disaster recovery modules that CrystalOnyx offers, where do you think has been the biggest form of differentiation from what everyone else has been doing, basically?
What I found is that we're the only ones that can do this at scale. So what that means is that one system is able to manage and read, write to and read from multiple tape libraries and silos. So, and we're vendor agnostic. So it could be a Spectra, vendor like Spectra, IBM, Oracle, what have you. All of those could be then tied in the same environment, running off the same system, that we're then being and making part of the virtual namespace. Mm-hmm. That someone can actually see. All they have to do is mount it like a network share, like an NFS or an SMB, my network share on my Windows computer. And there's my listing of the files that I have access to. When I open it, I click on it, it opens, just like a normal file would that was on my computer. But it might be coming from the cloud. It might be coming from the library. Mm-hmm. And so we have auto-archiving and auto-restore capability going down to the file level that makes it and presents it just as if it was sitting on a remote disk somewhere.
Wow. So in terms of, it's taking a lot of data to do this, right? And it's taking a lot of processing power overall to store all of this.
It's taking the whole entire data set and actually making it for the first time that you can get your arms around it. Mm-hmm. And get complete visibility. And I think a lot of like CTOs, CIOs, if you look across an organization with all the storage environments, going back from legacy to libraries, archives, cloud, how do you actually get visibility to all these different systems and silos? When I was, like, for instance, we were down working with NASA, and this is a question we found out that they had been asking for 12 years. How, in our storage environment that we keep adding onto, how much is getting used, right? So for 12 years they were asking that. I said, well, great, let me show you how. We ran through a demo.
12 years.
Great example of how to train, right?
Yeah.
Here's my problem. Someone came in the room, and the guy said, I just need to get them an answer. Can we shoot a dart? Can we do something? He said, no, here, let me show you. Scanned across, it was 500 terabytes. 3 hours later, 4 hours later, he had the answer. That he was able to go back into his meeting the next morning and said, they've been asking for this for 12 years, you figured it out in 4 hours. Just by using the tool that you have. That's amazing.
But 500 terabytes is kind of on the low end of what CrystalOnyx can.
Yes, yeah, we are up to, the largest environment we're currently managing is right around 3,500 petabytes. So that's 3.5 exabytes. That's the largest active environment today.
Okay, wow. So in terms of visualizing it,
Be about 3,500,000 laptops.
3,500,000 laptops.
Round up to 4 million.
4 million laptops. Under what time frame?
Oh, it's constant.
Constantly.
Constantly. So it's always seeing what's new and what's different. And what's cool about it is the way we do this is you're not having to move or affect change of any file. It goes out, scans, sees what's there, updates the metadata, updates the namespace, the global namespace, that it is exported as a file system. And then you're able to migrate and move things without it actually even changing someone's experience. So a user, an application, a service who's mounted the namespace as a file system gets access to the same files, same directories that they've been used to, even though it's now migrated off of the primary, maybe it's on secondary, remote location, or even a library archive. All of that's happening in the background, but it's happening by business policy that the organization has set up to how they want to manage their environment and utilize all of the technology to the best of its availability.
So does CrystalOnyx also advise these large enterprises on the best practices?
Yes, yeah, that's part of our initiative.
Okay.
Is just because you have a tool doesn't mean you know the best way to use it.
True.
And so, I'm really proud of this. The team worked really hard because this is complex stuff. And we figured out how to actually get a system up and running where within 2.5 hours, you've got a full enterprise class system up and running, starting to scan data and get actual insights to what's going on. Once you have insights, you have knowledge and you have power, and you can start making better decisions. And that's really the core of where we start. And then at that point, once you know the information that you have about all the data environment that you have, then it's really sitting down and saying, okay, now let's talk about how do you want to utilize this? What does this mean? And start talking about the departments. Who are the users of all the data? Someone has to be a user. If it's not, if it's pictures of dogs and cats, maybe it shouldn't be on the primary. Maybe we should move that off.
Right.
Right? So it's really understanding that and then understanding what's important. So it's how do you align technology that is the organization has using these really advanced tools and utilities like CrystalOnyx to then align to what the business processes need and what the users and the roles that they have and how they have to use the data. And that really starts to create the value chain, right? That's the value chain proposition. What do I have? What has value? And how do I classify that? And then assign governance. What's in band? What should we use? What shouldn't we use? And then that starts leading into all the cool stuff that's happening now with machine learning, AI, right? It's big buzzwords. There's a lot going on there. We'll unpack that later.
Yeah.
Right? But unless you can start getting your arms around just the data infrastructure and knowing what you have, what has value, what is value? Because we're going to be going in this information age. We're about ready to cross into the next phase, which is the digital data itself has an intrinsic value that I can either get direct value from or indirect or inferred value. And so that's really where I see this going next. And if you don't have a tool like CrystalOnyx to help you, it's going to be really challenging for some of these large siloed environments.
And how does that play into the vulnerability of data? You had people like John McAfee saying that nobody is safe at this point. We're all bugged with some type of Trojan horse or anything that can
Yeah, the thieves are in the castle.
The thieves are in the castle.
Right.
So how does this kind of interact with that situation?
So for cybersecurity, it's big issue. Not only just for infrastructure, but for businesses and government. So with organizations, now we have to assume based upon the experts, right, that have been studying this.
Right.
These are in the castle. So there is no single silver bullet ever for cybersecurity. It's really how do you develop a system and a process in place so that if something happens, it triggers off other events to ultimately protect yourself. The one way that we've identified, and we looked at this from a standpoint on if the thieves are in the castle, cybersecurity, all the intrusion, everything you built, right? How do you now keep the crown jewels safe?
Yeah,
right?
At that point, right?
And so, now you're talking about cyber resiliency and business continuity. So if my castle gets stormed, right, everyone's held hostage. How do I make sure that we can get rid of everybody and then come back up and running as quickly as possible? And so the way we looked at this was it's because CrystalOnyx is a version management system as well, so it's a version management control. So it looks at everything as a point in time. So we can do incremental archiving. So every time it goes out, whether it's moving a file, copying a file, ingesting, looking at something new, we're always gathering metadata information about it, and then able to apply that and say, okay, what is sensitive, what is critical? And then we have actionable insights that we've built that say, okay, all this is getting used, and anything that's used within a certain period of time based on the organization has some value to it.
True.
Or something.
Right.
Right? And there's always an 80-20 rule. Things evolve. So how do you focus on, okay, well, let's make sure, first off, that and target and say everything that's sensitive and critical to the success of the organization running, we can make sure is protected. And so that's part of that cyber resiliency. And the way we do that is apply policies that do incremental archive and store it on immutable air-gap storage or immutable cloud storage, so that if something happens, and it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's a matter of when. So that you can quickly identify through the other tools that the organization has, something's gone on, we have ransomware, we've got the cyber, we've got a hack, whatever it is. Identify when it started to happen, run the playbook. Playbook is we wipe the servers, clean them out, put new images, we wipe all of the files that are affected, and usually it's going to be not just like a few files, it's directories and volumes full.
And this is millions
of files.
and millions of files. Yeah.
And then we look and say, okay, this happened on X date, let's go back 2 or 3 days before that. Right now, let's target the data files that were affected and restore them exactly as they existed. Those tie in with the servers, tie in, and now we're matching back to that time date of what's clean, and then starting forward from there. So at that point, you're able to do this effectively with policies and tools. So you're actually going in and saying, here's the policy I'm running, we want to restore this, and it's not just doing it like at one time. You're able to go off and run this parallel across multiple systems at scale. So I could be running 5, 10, 15 restore policies from various immutable storage locations that I'm restoring my files back, and have that back up and running. Sometimes in hours. Most of the cases we've seen, it's within 24 to 36 hour period, the organization's back up and running.
And in terms of all these different locations that you can store these files and this data, what is the standard protocol right now in the industry? How many do you
Well, it depends on who you talk to.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
And the good thing is, we say yes.
We say yes?
Yes. So, some people say, well, it's got to be a cloud, it's got to be AWS, it's got to be Azure, it's got to be this object store, it's got to be my uncle's backyard.
Right.
Great, we say yes. So if that's what you think is going to be the best, then we can also share with you, here's what we consider to be a best practice, right? And if that works for you, great. If not, have at it with what you're doing. But one thing we can do, because of our experience with this, we know that if you follow our best practices, say, I'm going to put it on a mutable air gapped, we've so far been able to say 100% restore and back up and running without any issues. So that's complete cyber resiliency and business continuity at a file level for the ultimate get out of jail free card. I mean, there was no ransomware paid, there was no any cyber attack, right? Trojan, whatever. Those were eradicated, redone using the playbooks, and then all the data restored very quickly and painlessly.
Yeah, and you must be saving, aside from the costs of relying on a third party and the fact that you guys don't even change anything when you go into an organization, you just add on to it and can seamlessly be removed. You must be saving a ridiculous amount on energy costs, because if you're doing millions of files, I mean, I've seen the financials of a few of these businesses, that adds up fast.
It adds up a lot, right, fast. So you've got to look at the HR cost.
Right.
How many, if I do it with some group, my internal costs, as well as the people I hire. So let's say it's an army of 10, 15. Right? Then I've also got the operational, the energy costs. What's the cost of being down? Right?
What's the cost of being down?
Yeah.
Right.
So if you're a a healthcare network that got affected, now you're affecting, surgeries, people's lives are at stake. That becomes very serious, and it's all because of nefarious actors. So how do you protect yourself, no matter what? And then be able to not only say I'm protected no matter what, but here's then how we're going to restore from it and do it so that I'm not down, I'm not affecting the business, I'm not affecting people's lives.
Yeah, this is something that is really changing a lot of people's lives and making people live safer.
Right.
Really. That's what it's solving.
Because now we're looking at this becoming a value, right? Information value.
Right.
Information value chain. Now there's financial implications, right? If I don't have access to this data. If something's affected, what happens to not just the business, but what happens to people's livelihoods who are depending upon it? So it does have a ripple effect. And I think it's going to have even more of a ripple effect as we go forward.
So let's rewind a little bit and talk about Tony in the early days, because how did you get started in all of this? How did this journey begin?
Sheer dumb luck.
Dumb luck.
So, it's, if I look back and say, did I ever think I'd be doing this? The answer is no. I started out in biomedical and electrical engineering. Right? And that's where I kind of really, Marquette University, little thumbs up there. But that's really where I started, right? And then worked within mobile computing applications, got really good at wide area wireless, which becomes, now we use it as cellular and CDPD and all that fun stuff.
So what year was that?
That was 1995 to 2000 I was doing that.
Okay.
And found myself actually then doing business partner development down in the Southeast, working with ERP. So we were doing bolt-on for supply chain. And that was right at the advent of what supply chain now became. But at the beginning, it was really putting those pieces in place and understanding how you create value chains, right, for goods and services.
And what type of goods and services were those?
Well, it's all a lot of manufacturing. So we worked with World of Coca-Cola. I know a lot of the organizations I kind of forget now. But a lot of Fortune 1000 companies who are all putting in SAP, Oracle, IBM.
Early days.
Early days, right?
Right.
And then all that evolved over time. But when that started really evolving, I got bored. So I moved to California and did a startup company with my stepfather, who came from the storage business. And we were selling the first parallel ATA raids to .coms, which in 2000 was an amazing business to be in for about 12 to 14 months.
Right. And then the crash happened.
Then the crash happened. So from there, then okay, where else do we go? So then we got into medical imaging. That's where everything was going digital from film. So we had medical imaging for hospitals and clinics, in radiology, in photography, it was becoming digital, and ended up working a lot in media and entertainment. Became chief engineer, and that time we were doing this whole shed from film and tape over to digital because of the SAG strike and everything else that was happening.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so we were building some of the first workflows, digital workflows from camera acquisition with the Red, Sony, and Panasonic into editorial, storage, archive, and distribution, and automating the entire thing. So that instead of having an army of people be responsible for doing dailies, we could actually automate it down to like 1 or 2 or 3 people involved to get to the finished product. So a huge time savings, but also huge cost savings. And then that led me into designing and developing the first product with some partners, which was a digital storage, archive, and digital asset management, storage, and archive management product called Constellation VCM. And it was kind of the first of its kind. I saw that there was a value if we could figure out how to take projects, move it off primary storage to secondary, and then move it back quickly, easily, effortlessly. And then be able to then also have intelligence around it to start doing clips. So you could do these string outs of edits and do it in a way that was really fast, easy, and made the editor's life easier. Because if you can, especially in media entertainment, time is money. And if you can shorten the cycle for something, you've not only saved time, but you've saved an incredible amount of money and cost associated with a post-production process. So that's really what we focused on. We're pretty successful with it. And we had a lot of good sales. We sold, the largest one was actually to McDonald's.
Oh, wow.
And then, unfortunately, CEO made some bad decisions, and so went bankrupt just about the time it was starting to get implemented. And so that's when I had my entrepreneurial seizure.
Oh, boy. That's my favorite part. Yeah.
Like, well, I've been doing this. I know the product. Okay, I can I can go out, I can start a business. But I had this idea of not only let's take this, but let's take it to the next step.
Okay.
And the next step was, okay, we've got all this working now within a studio or post-production house, but let's take this and apply it to the cloud. So we can now start doing now what we call hybrids, right? It didn't exist at the time, but it was being able to take multiple terrestrial sites and data centers, tie it to the cloud, and be able to move files intelligently. So we're not moving the masters, we're moving the proxy files that we're working with to be able to edit those. And so I went through and raised money to do it, this grand vision. And after raising money 3 times, got to the 95-yard line each time, it fell apart.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Okay.
right? And it's like, well, I can't do this anymore. I'm done.
But when you were in the middle of that journey, especially what year was this?
This was
2010s?
So this would have been 2022, 23.
Okay.
I'm sorry, excuse me, 2012, 2013.
Right. So, the amount of information we have today compared to
It's
even 10
astronomical.
years ago.
It's astronomical.
And, entrepreneurship was also just not as common as it is today.
It was hard to find information. I had to go out and find it. And everyone I talk to says, give me money and I'll raise it for you.
Right.
Right? Well, I want to know how to do it, first off, right? I just don't want to blindly accept somebody, because that, if someone's got a great story to tell, and then they're asking for a lot of money, probably it's 50-50 if it's going to come through.
And thankfully that part of the industry is shifting, at least now.
Yes.
We still see that, but ideally you have somebody that's more performance-based.
Yeah,
and
if someone
incentivized.
says, I'm going to come up and I'm going to do it all for you, don't worry about it, there's a problem.
Yep.
Yeah. So I found a place, CEO Space, that really helped me. It was a great mentor. So put me in touch. I learned how to raise money. How do you structure something? How do you structure a security?
Mm-hmm.
And so really gave me a lot of the guidance, the value to say, great. But first time doing it, my mistake was, looking back now, it's like, well, I was trying to do everything myself.
Oh, yeah.
Which, if you're running the business, supporting customers, doing the technical, doing the sales, raising, there's not enough time in a day. So it just, I petered out. I didn't have enough runway.
So so lack of runway is something we see a lot with companies even today. And this is something that you were working on by yourself more than 10 years ago. After the company wasn't successful, what was that like, that period between what's next and kind of accepting that this was a great idea and you had a great idea and it still didn't work out? How was that kind of?
So it was like, oh, holy crap, what am I going to do now?
Holy crap, yeah.
And so, I start looking and saying, okay, what else is there?
Mm-hmm.
What's out there? And a person who I know called me up, says, hey, have you heard about this product called StrongLink?
Okay.
No, what is it? I look up and it's actually from an organization that was a new spinoff of Strongbox Data Solutions. It was a spinoff from Crossroads. And I knew them before when I was doing a lot of storage environments with SANs. And they had some good components that were used in those architectures.
Right.
So I was familiar with them, I was familiar with the people, and then I started reading the website, and I'm like, they've got the same idea I have, but it looks like they're farther along and they have more money.
Yeah.
Right? 2 key things. They're farther along and they have more money.
And this is the same idea that you were trying to implement from your startup?
Very similar. They had a different approach. It was similar concept, but they had a much broader vision for it that I didn't see initially. So I ended up having a conversation with the CEO, David Cerf, at the time, and I said, love what you're doing. I bet you're having this problem and this problem and this problem. If you want to get a job, that's a great way to ask, right? I bet you're having this problem. I have a solution if you like it.
Yeah.
So we talked to some of the people on the team. They said, great, come on board. So I joined as a senior solutions architect
Okay.
at that point. And, you know, come to find out, they had more money, but they weren't farther along. I had actually more advanced concepts at the time than they did.
Oh,
But it was able to then, you know, work with a brilliant team of engineering and development and take something that I knew had an opportunity to make a really big impact on the world.
so this is kind of a redemption arc where
Kind of, right.
you had this first business that was solving a legitimate problem that the market needed, and then all of a sudden, through providence, divine intervention,
Right.
you were just placed in the company to solve the problem that they were already struggling
Right,
with.
and they were developing, and I understand, you know, a lot of the concepts, because a lot of these concepts are difficult, and
Right.
if you don't understand the storage, you don't understand that history of how things got to where they are, it's really hard to go out and just start working in it. So, you know, I was able to basically jump in and very quickly get up to speed. And, you know, so with what we were doing at the time, I mean, if you look at it, it's, you know, trying to create a virtualization, create a global namespace around it, and that's something that can be exported as a file system without any stubbing. So it's all metadata. It's all just, you know, pointers. And metadata management had never been done like that. Still, I think we're the only product out there that has been able to do this successfully. And so it took a long time. There was a lot of, you know, starts and stops. We had a lot of early adopters that, you know, it was just too slow. We had to figure out how to increase the performance. And that's one of the things that I'm really proud about what we've done is we've figured out how to make this completely scalable so that we can handle, you know, a single job, you know, ingesting, moving, copying files, right, affecting some sort of, having some effect on the file themselves and storage. We're running up to like millions and billions of files in a single process. Now, the way we can do that is because we're multi-threaded, multi-process. So we're able to scale this across all of the nodes. So if you have, you know, 3 nodes in a cluster, great. If I have 6 nodes, even better, because I just have a force multiplier. So every time you keep adding the nodes, we're spreading the threads out, and we're getting a force multiplier across processes. And so we can end up going extremely fast. In most cases, we're actually running faster than the storage itself and have to tune it down because we're just we overload it.
How does that work, where you're moving faster than the storage itself?
Well, storage systems have, whether it be a single, you know, file system or a parallel file system, have a protocol of how they interface to get data, right? And then that ability is there's so many incoming processes that can be handled. So, right, just like on a computer bus, right? If you know, the faster your CPU, the more things you can do. And so we, because we are running, you know, so like a 6-node system with 20 threads of doing I/O. So that's 6 times 20, so that's 120 threads, all processing data. Most storage systems can, you know, 64 or 96. So we'll overrun that with typically maybe we'll handle it with 1 job, but if you add another job behind it, doing another 20 threads on top of that, all of a sudden the storage comes to a halt because we've overwhelmed it. It's not fast enough. So that if we tune the threads back, then all of a sudden we can be running multiple jobs. The storage is actually humming along at its most efficient method possible. We're tuned to what that storage needs, and everything's running faster than it normally would.
And it's all optimized by the technology.
Yeah, but we can see. I mean, we start something, and we're tuning it on the fly. So it's not like you have to stop. We can run a job, see that something's happening, just pause it, stop it, tune the threads down, restart it. It takes back up, and it's now working within the new throttle. So it's easy to throttle on the fly without having to go back and re-architect something. So we did this with a great example of it was Library of Congress when we helped them migrate, I think it was 3.5, 4 petabytes from their data center up to AWS cloud. And they were using the snowmobile, which is the big truck, big semi that has all the data.
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to be able to have their data center have visibility to what was in AWS. So used the CrystalOnyx to do that. At the time it was Strong Link, it's CrystalOnyx.
And we'll get into
Yeah.
that.
But so we said, how big is your pipe? We just had some architecture discussions. Great, wonderful. We set up. We had, I think it was 5 servers, 5 nodes there, all running with a big fat pipe. Completely overwhelmed AWS, couldn't take it. So we realized, oh, okay, you're using certain processes. Your maximum efficiency is going to be 32 threads across the incoming system. Okay, great. So we took these 5 nodes with this big fat pipe and then on the fly redistributed it to 16 nodes with little straws. So we got the same throughput that we were planning on, but redistributed across 16 nodes with little tiny CP straws.
And how long did that process take?
Once we figured that out, it took about, we were able to get finished in, I think, 2.5 months.
2.5 months.
Yeah.
Right, and you're coming into a pretty large organization to do that.
Yes, yeah.
So
So I don't think, we're able to do, because we can go scanning and then intelligently start migrating and moving, copying files, we're able to actually do things very quickly and focus on what's important first and then pick up the other stuff later. So you're focused on what's important and then trailing back to what's the least important. And we found that has the least impact on an organization. Makes it more seamless, more transparent. And this whole time we were doing all this, Library of Congress was still up and running. So we were doing this for all the copyright and all the trademark material.
Right. And I'm going to move at your discretion for the level of clients that you are currently working with, but they are very large enterprises and they are very significant customers, name brand, something that you'd say at the dinner table type of company.
Yep.
And it's really impressive to see what's going on. How did the transition from StrongLink to CrystalOnyx happen?
So the good question. So Partner 1 was the original owner of, I should say parent of StrongLink. And from the spinoff, they put some money behind it. Ultimately, it was actually $30 million in development it took to get the product up and running.
Into this technology over
Yes,
10 years.
to where we are.
Right.
And it was about probably, it's 10 years now, so it's about 8 years it took to get to that point.
Okay.
When, at that point, Partner 1 said, we're not seeing what we want out of this. Let's make some changes. So had some executive management changes, organizational change. At that point, then I went from being the senior solutions architect and took the role as vice president of field operations. So doing exactly what I've always been doing, except now also bringing under the fold engineering, development, directly working with all the customers around the world, rather than just North America and Asia. So that expanded my role over to Europe, and saw that there was some of our customers were having a really challenging time. So went over there, and I spent time with them, and we reconfigured the system. We made some upgrades, made some changes in the workflows, to the point where now they're very, very, I think they're happy.
Yeah.
They're stable. They're still with us. So
They're still with us, right?
And that's like the German Climate Center. DCARE that. With Bosch and ETH. So these are some of the organizations that we spent a lot of time on, and there were challenges because we identified that even though we had gotten to the point, there was still, the system wasn't meeting what the requirement of what was expected. So I took the engineering team and we really focused on let's drill down, let's get this fixed, let's make sure it's done right. And it took about another 12 months to do it. During that time, the partner went and said, well, let's refocus this and change. And so they had some ideas. Test marketed those, which was becoming like a Me Too. It's really what they wanted to do. And if you have something like this, trying to make it a Me Too becomes difficult because it's designed for enterprise, designed to take on large data environments. It starts where most others fail.
Right.
And so ultimately said, we're done. We're going to cease operations, put a note out to everyone, to all the customers and partners, and lead the team off. And so I just felt like I had a level of integrity. I worked with all these customers. I worked with all these people. They become friends, people I knew very well. And decided, I stood in front of them and said, I will help make this right. So I kind of felt like I just can't walk away. So I went to each of them and said, here's the deal. Here's what's going on. You got the letter. I will either help you forward to migrate off this platform, or I'll find a way forward. If I find a way forward, are you willing to stick with me? And they all said yes. So then I was able to negotiate a deal and acquire all of the IP technology and the licensing, worldwide licensing rights for it, and ultimately decided, okay, this has been sold as a platform, but really, what is it? And that's where I realized, thinking through this, that it really is a utility. If you look at it, it touches technology, it touches storage, servers, anything it touches it makes better, is visibility. So, the value proposition is CrystalOnyx provides data clarity. Right? It's Crystal and Onyx protection. So it's clear view, quick access to data no matter where it sits, orchestrating very, very fast file movement, like the highest performance, I think, in the market right now. That files will show up where they're needed, when they're needed, in the right format so they can be used easily and accessible by the user of the application or the service. And also ensure that all of the sensitive and critical data used by the organization is protected no matter what against any cyber attack. So providing that cyber resilience and business continuity.
It's really nice to think about, obviously not when you're in the middle of it, but looking back, going from just an idea, hoping that maybe there's someone else out there that's trying to solve for it, then finding that tribe of people that were solving for it, representing them as almost like this evangelist for the mission and the word and spreading the message. There's this book called Barbarians to Bureaucrats where it talks about there's a prophet and then the barbarians go and they conquer a bunch of nations and they try and show everyone the new message, and then eventually it becomes the builders and explorers, and then it becomes administration, bureaucracy, aristocracy, and collapse. But it's very, and this is why I love working with startups, is because, and not even just startups, but restructurings or special situations in general, it's this period where we're going through some chaos or some volatility or something's changed that isn't part of the status quo, and then you get to look back after all those challenges and say we overcame that, we saw it through, and now there's this period of like a golden era that I think you're going into right now, where everybody, after years and years of hitting at this project, everyone is just adopting this at an insane speed. I mean, the company is doubling or tripling every year from what we're projecting.
Yes.
So it's a lot to handle. But now that you're in the thick of it, how are you thinking about this?
Well, it's interesting having conversations now, right? Because it used to be like, I felt like it was the lonely prophet, right? Sitting on like, doom is coming.
Yeah, like everyone pay attention.
And everyone's like, you're crazy. No. But now it's like, now these conversations are like, so you do, data movement, you can do data migration, you can help us do X, Y, Z. Like, yeah. I remember we had this conversation 4 years ago, right? And you didn't want anything to do with it. But now, things have evolved. There's the trend of value that's seen. And I think people are these organizations are starting to come back and have these really unique conversations. That's opening my eyes to also new opportunities, because we're letting that technology be what it does best, right? So if you've got a great deduplication algorithm, wonderful. There's a reason why you sell on that value proposition. Let us help you. So we're not gonna try to overlay or change it in any way. We're just gonna add value and make it so that you can achieve value. If that means you keep it with working with you, with your product for 6 months or a year, okay, great. But usually it's like you work with it 6 months or a year and like, oh, and we can do this, and then we can do this, and we can do that. And there's other things that are discovered or uncovered that it can help with. And that's where the exciting thing comes on, because now you're like putting together a puzzle. How can we add value? How can we help and be of service? And I think that's really the way I approach things, is how can I help and be of service? Because I never believe in like selling necessarily. It's more of like, if I could provide value service, it's the fair price, and this makes sense, then there's no reason why we won't go forward.
Yeah.
Work together. I'm always very open and transparent with everyone. I start the conversation for every deal we start with, is I will be open and transparent and tell you what we can do and what we cannot do, because you're going to find out about it anyway, and I'd rather we know now than waste each other's time.
Yeah. So it's just, you weren't wrong. You were just super early.
I was very early. Story of my own life.
Yeah. You're basically one of the first pioneers really in this industry to kind of start banging the cymbals of this.
I actually started really piecing this together about maybe 15 years ago, 16 years ago.
Right.
And then just through career path incarnations, and my whole focus has always been, how do we align technology to help organizations, businesses be better and help people do their jobs better.
So touching on that, if we could maybe segment, let's say 5 years in a business cycle, you're saying you started this 15 years ago. So over these 3 business cycles that you've kind of witnessed, what do you think, what was everyone focusing on, let's say from year 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and then 10 to 15? How have trends in technology been shifting from the perspective of somebody who's doing data management?
Good question. So, we started out with, everything is on a pendulum.
Okay.
So we start with, even going back to VAX terminals, right? We've got the central brain with dumb terminals. We've had software hosting, application hosting. That went up to into the data center storage, and then came back to each company. Then the idea about cloud computing, started. So there's a huge migration from terrestrial data center up to cloud, and that, especially I think during COVID, that was exacerbated. Right? People swallowed the blue pill.
Yeah.
And if we're not cloud, we're out. So everyone started moving to cloud to come to realize that, cloud's not the ubiquitous panacea that it was made out to be. There's some applications, there's some challenges. And so now, how do you right-size from that? So one of the things I know we could do, or we've proven we could do, is if you talk to an organization, they're going to say, well, we've got to move everything back. Move everything up, we'll move everything back. Well, usually it'll take, in most cases, 10 times the amount of money it took to get it up there. But you don't have to move everything back. If you have a way to intelligently go up, scan it, figure out what was there, what's needed by applications, or however we want to figure it out using metadata, we can then intelligently scan or migrate back only what's needed. So now creating a hybrid environment or a distributed environment becomes extremely easy and cost effective and efficient, because we're only targeting the files that we need when we need them, so that those can then be migrated and then transformed into whatever they need to be. Is it back to a Windows environment with Active Directory? back to his NFS environment, what have you. So, it's very easy to start applying those migrations and picking up the necessary permissions and ACLs that are needed in order to make those files work with the applications the way they should.
So it seems like every 3 to 5 years, technology kind of, everybody in this space starts getting very, very excited, and then the bubble kind of...
Yep, there's a shiny object.
It's a very, a new
Right?
thing.
Shiny object. Squirrel. So, and that's great. There's a lot of advantages, but, it's knowing how that technology can be implemented and used, because it's never like the way you did something when you apply a new technology to it. So applying cloud. Cloud's not disk, right? Cloud's not like my laptop or like my server. It has very, very fundamental ways it has to communicate to get files up, get files back, and then be able to process when you're in the cloud. So, a lot of organizations, when they moved to the cloud, they were running queries against all their data sets. Well, if you run a query, it's a fraction of a penny. But you do that 1 million times a day, that adds up.
Yeah, that's a lot of pennies.
Right. So, how do you right size from that? Well, do you pull everything back? Maybe, maybe not. But maybe if there's a way to go up, virtualize it, present that as a global namespace, and then run the queries against that, you've now reduced that cost to negligible, negligible zero, compared to what it was costing before, and still getting the same result. So we're finding that there's just a lot of unique things that we can do very easily to be able to put this utility in and add value without changing any of the infrastructure, any of the processes around, or heavily impacting an organization.
So it seems when it comes to the way trends are moving, we went through this period of developing technology, developing cloud, a gold rush land grab situation to expand data centers.
Well, now the data centers are expanding because cloud doesn't exist in clouds, right?
Yeah.
It actually runs on data centers, on servers and compute hardware that's just managed by somebody else. And so now with the advent of AI and processing, machine learning, everything that's going on, the compute requirements are, there's not enough load. I mean, there's not enough capacity to handle the load. So there's a land grab going on right now of building out these data centers for GPU and CPU, mainly GPU. And those are power hungry.
They're power hungry.
They're
for
very
sure.
power hungry.
And that means energy in this case.
Right. Well, energy and cooling.
And cooling.
Right.
And cooling.
So, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but that's everyone's trying to get involved and trying to understand how to apply this. And this is revolutionary. I mean, really, the way about the technology itself around AI is following the same models that's been perfected over the last number of years, like 3 to 5 years. But now the way of looking at how we can apply it and creating these AI agents that will then plug into the large language models of, and pick the one you want. Do you want ChatGPT? Do you want, OpenAI, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, whatever. Pick your one, right? But they all have a certain, just like with technology, they have a very certain value that they provide. One will do something better than the other, right? So which one applies to what you're trying to accomplish? That's the large language model you want to use, but then how do you affect that into your process? How are you going to affect change or add value or automate something? And that's where those agents come in. And so now that's working with the data sets that you have, getting access to the data. So the data itself is what's going to then drive the ability for intelligent processing of using a large language model. And unless you start creating that value chain with the data that you have, you're not going to get the right outcome or the right output using the large language model.
So do you think that is the biggest bottleneck?
Right now, I see that's the biggest challenge.
That's the biggest challenge. Okay.
And it's because if I have data with, and files, millions of files, all over my organization. If I have 1,000, not a problem.
Right.
If I have millions or billions, that gets to be kind of a big challenge. How do we start sorting through it? What is usable? Something that was 30 years ago actually might be valid and usable. Something that was just done yesterday may not.
Right.
So
The new shiny object.
right. So
Yeah.
how do you determine what has value? What has intrinsic value for what we're trying to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you start sorting through that? We had one customer, in the entertainment industry, that they had to separate their business,
Okay.
right? And was being bought by another studio,
Happens.
right? So they called up and says, "Hey, I heard about what you're doing." Great. Yes, here it is. Here's what we can do. Show them. Great. What's the price? Give them the price. Yeah, I think we'll do it ourselves. It's fine. So they had 18 months to do it, I think it was. About 12 months later, called back up. "Hey, remember me?" "Yeah, how's the project going? How far have you gotten?" "About 40 terabytes.
40 terabytes.
Of three petabytes? So they only had 2.99 petabytes left to go, right?
Right. A lot.
A lot. And we had to get it done now. No longer 18 months, it's like 6 months. So gave him another demo, went through it, says we need a report, we need to figure out how to separate this out. Like, okay, no problem, here's how we can do it. Created the special report of what they needed, that they could then run scans across all of the different storage, pull all that in, run it by report, and then by group ownership, determine where everything in that directory would go. And we're talking about, now not just a file level, we're talking about millions of directories, right, across billions of files. And not just one location, but actually ended up being about 12 locations around the country where all of these different storage environments were stored. So it was determining what was what, who gets what, and then being able to then apply a policy that would copy the files from where they existed over to the new storage and new domain, apply the new permissions and new ACLs under the new domain, and do it, at scale. So it wasn't just doing one at a time; it was doing multiple at a time. So
On a time constraint.
on a time constraint, had to get done.
Yeah.
So they were able to do it within the time frame.
What do you think has been the biggest challenge when it comes to dealing with clients or customers, at least in the discovery period, when they're asking you questions and you might be in this position of, well, I got to show you so that you could see it for yourself? How does that kind of play out in your experience?
So that's something that was always difficult, because I can tell the greatest story, show the best shadow puppets,
Yeah.
but unless you get to do it yourself, right, and run through the example, it's never going to work. So we would go through these big events, and it's like a whole proof of concept, rah, everything, and talk about it, spend 6 months, 3 months talking about it, and then customer would spend another 3 months maybe testing it, somewhat, getting through it. So I figured that there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
So what I decided to do was take a different approach, where the great thing about CrystalOnyx is that it can scale. And we've gotten to the point now where it's very easy to install. You install with an ISO or with a VM, give it an IP address, and then walk through the wizard, and you're actually, in 7 steps, you're up and running on a GUI.
7 steps for a bunch of petabytes.
Correct.
A whole bunch.
Whole bunch. So after that, all you have to do is hit one button, scan, and it goes off, starts scanning. And within minutes, you're starting to get insights about what's happening. What do you have? What do you have? What do you have? So we have, as part of this Rapid Start program, we said, okay, well, let's do a data clarity challenge.
Okay.
Right? So take the challenge. If you can spend $3,500 for 3 months, put the software in, run on bare metal or a VM, run it, and see for yourself. And everyone would say, we have the most active storage environment. I mean, our stuff gets used a lot. Every single one who said that, about 60% of it hasn't been touched for 5 years or more. So I would like to see someone actually prove me wrong.
And they haven't yet.
Not yet.
The numbers show.
And I'm happy proven wrong. Show me. Because what's great, after this gets done, it just prints out a graph. There's no sensitive information. It's like, here's the capacity, here's the number of files, here's the makeup of files, and this is how much has been used, how much is not. Very easy, without any sensitive information being displayed. So you can take a screenshot, post it, send it out, saying, here's our environment. So I'd love for someone to actually say, our 1 petabyte environment is actively used. 90% of this is used, like constantly on a weekly basis.
There's no way.
There's no way.
It's just math.
I can't see it. But prove me wrong.
Take that challenge to yourself, right?
Data clarity challenge. So part of a rapid start program, 3,500. Install it. You'll be up and running in 2.5 hours, and then start running it. Come back, and within 14 days, you'll have more visibility to your storage environment than you've ever had. And at least there, you've got knowledge, and knowledge is power, because at that point, you're able to start making better decisions. So that's our goal. Like, just prove it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Prove it yourself.
So we're still in the early innings of 2025. How are you thinking about the future of CrystalOnyx, the direction the company's going in? Where would you like to see this product being used?
Well, the great thing about starting this is that I didn't do it alone. So when I went out, talked to all the customers, and said, "Are you with me?" Figured out how to do this. My next initial calls were out to the core development team, and so these guys have worked with for years. This is part of our high performance team, and we've worked together. Some of the cases up to 10 years, so we know each other very well. Everyone has a specific core talent that they're amazing at, and we know how to work together. So I know that I can trust somebody. If they say they're going to do it, I know exactly how it's going to get done and in what time frame.
Internationally as well.
Internationally,
We've got
yes.
people all over the place, right?
Yes. But without these guys, this wouldn't be able to be possible, because we were able to pick up right where we left off. I didn't have to train anybody or bring any new development team in at this point. We were able to actually go with the core team that I know got us, that we worked together for a year to actually get this hardened, stable, performant, and able to do the things we're doing now. And so, I was very fortunate and blessed that they were all willing to join, and join on a promise, right? I can't guarantee it, but this is what I can do. And we'll get to the point where you can come on as full-time. You can get insurance. You can get benefits.
Yeah.
You can start providing for the family.
And we're working on that right now, I guess, together.
Well,
right?
I've got partially there. So everyone is W-2, everyone is medical benefits. And I'm still then increasing everyone's salary, but it's an incremental effect.
Right.
Right? And it was very important to me that everyone has a part of this. So everyone of the team, as part of the core team, has equity ownership in it.
Yeah. No, it's super, because this isn't your first rodeo. You had several experiences from a distribution perspective, from a product perspective, in many, or I would say in very long business cycles, to see this out. So the strategy for the next 10 or probably even 20 years.
Yes.
It's just you have to kind of wait for time to go on and things to play out in accordance with that.
And it's a lot of strategic positioning, right? So like where we are now didn't just happen. There was a lot of strategic positioning that went on to get us to this point. And then there's more strategic positioning going on to keep us moving forward. But the idea is that, is to leverage and force multiply. So, leveraging the relationships, leveraging strategic partnerships, being able to identify, okay, first off, what am I good at?
Right.
And what am I not good at? And if I'm not good at something, who can I find that I can trust, that bring in, that can help fill that skill gap? Right? And so that was instrumental. That's what led us to start talking.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I realized when I was talking to the bank, like, boy, there's a lot of mistakes. So, I'm not I'm not a CFO. I understand what needs to happen, but I'm not sure the right steps of how to get there. And right now I can't afford to okay, well, let's just try it out and
just see what
fail.
goes on.
No.
This was a very high risk
Yes.
situation.
Right. And same thing with marketing. Finding somebody who understood and says, okay, how do I create an inbound and outbound marketing program so that it can start creating pipelines? Right. So that's been instrumental, being able to have Brian, so we be part of this as well. He got it. He comes from a storage background and had a couple successful exits. So he knows how to scale marketing and do it for a high technology company.
Yeah, enterprise level.
An enterprise level.
Yeah.
That can be successful, right? And what works and what doesn't. So that's really, having relationships like you and Brian were critical in order for me to start implementing the next steps. And then just bringing other team members on board as we need to. From solutions architects, sales, account management. Our next step is to build out, really build up the QA so that we have a really automated, good process that as we're implementing all these changes, it's going through without having to do a lot of manual handholding. Same thing where we can automate the entire process to help create efficiencies so it supplements the high performance team of what we're doing. So everyone can focus on what they're good at, and then we can build an automation around it to just make things seamless.
Yeah. It doesn't need to have, 100, 200 people doing the same job.
No. It's just removing friction. It's finding ways to remove friction so that the process flows.
I love that. Yeah. So for, let's say, first-time founders in this space, the data center space, the AI space, in terms of what you're seeing with trends going out, let's say 5 or 10 years, what's some advice you'd give them?
That kind of circles back around to your initial question. So where I see going right now is we've not finished, I don't believe we've finished the whole development piece of what's going to happen with AI. I think we're just scratching the surface.
In terms of the land grab?
Not only the land grab, but the impact it's going to have. Because what I see is right now we've had a lot of different technologies come out in pretty rapid succession, if you think about it. We've had the cloud adoption, right? So cloud's been around for a long time, but it's been a slow evolution, right? Until the point it picked up steam. And then you have blockchain, right? And all of that. So how does that get used? How does that get implemented? The idea about digital twins. So there's all of these concepts that when you start looking at it and applying, again, removing friction, right? Adding intelligence, adding automation. How do we start creating this level of intelligence around a process so that can help automate some of the roles, some of the things that need to be done? And that's where I think we're going to see a lot of process automation. It's almost like kind of what the assembly line did for manufacturing. I think a lot of the AI automation is going to do for information management and start to create a value chain around this where the digital information that we have now carries value with it, whether it be in a crypto, in some sort of blockchain, but there's limitations within blockchain. Blockchain tells me who the owner is, but it doesn't tell me who the collaborators are.
Who the collaborators
Right.
are.
So if I came up with something, but you helped me, Mitch helped me, Sally helped me create this, how do they get a piece of the pie? How do they share in that? It's always been a big thing. It's like I can track it back to who's the owner, but then how do I start applying to who's a collaborator?
Like an escrow.
Shares
Yeah.
in it. And how do you disseminate that? How do you track it? And what becomes the single source of truth to manage that? And so those are the things I'm thinking about. Like how do we start applying that? Because I think we have a right framework to do it. But then how do you enforce it, right? And how do you start then really saying, and part of that is also holding people accountable, right? Because there's, how do you hold something accountable when it's digital? It's imaginary.
Right.
So how do we actually give it some weight, some girth, and some tangibility to it, so that it does have an intrinsic value.
That is a lot to think about, for sure.
And so that means the digital infrastructure, we've entered into the information age, but now I think we're entering the information value age.
Information value.
And that's part of the whole, concept about Web3, is the third wave of digital information, is how do we, why does Facebook, or now Meta, why are they storing everyone's pictures and videos? Right? Once you post it, it's now under their ownership.
Yeah, forever.
So what value is there, right? So you're going to start, I think we're going to start seeing an intrinsic value shift in how digital data holds, is transacted, what is the value given to it? I think NFTs were a good example of an attempt of that.
Like a first try.
A first try, because I think,
Yeah.
that concept makes sense, but I don't think we have the final piece of it yet.
So the creativity aspect is always going to be the
That's
ultimate
what
driver.
we do. I mean, we're humans, we create.
We have to keep creating.
Yes. I mean, that's what we do. We've done since the dawn of time, since, we picked up 2 tools, right? The first thing we did is make fire and then start painting on caves.
Yeah.
So, right? So, I mean, it's in our DNA.
We've gone a long way.
Yes, we have.
We've gone a long way.
So now you're going to see the digital cave.
I love it. So where can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
So to find us, visit CrystalOnyx.com, CrystalOnyx.com. Email is info@crystalonyx.com. Happy to schedule meetings, happy to have any phone calls, answer any questions. It really just starts with the conversation and how can we be of help and service.
Tony, it's been a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you very much for
I've
having me,
learned a lot.
David.
It's been great.
Wonderful. Thank
All
you
right.
very much, sir.
Thank you. All right. I think that's a wrap.